Hi, my name is Jeanette and I want to thank you for joining me on the channel Jane Reads. Today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in the month of July. I ended up reading 7 books, and if you saw my July's TBR video, I had spun the wheel and I planned on reading 6 books. So the first book I'm going to talk about is that 7th book, which is actually the first book I read at the beginning of the month. I started at the end of June and then finished it at the beginning of July. And then I went into the books that were on my TBR wheel. So that first book was Danger in the Shadows by D. Henderson. This is the prequel to the O'Malley series, which is probably the most well-known series that D. Henderson, like the series that D. Henderson is known for. I first read this probably 12, 15 years ago, quite a while. This came out in 1999, so, and I know I didn't read it then, but I back then I read the whole series kind of all at once, so I think it was probably around 2002. Ooh, that's more than 15 years ago. Wow. Sometimes when I think back to kind of the situations I was in when I read something, I start to feel really old. So, as I mentioned, this was a reread for me, but because I'd read it so many years ago, I didn't really remember a whole lot of it. It is a romantic suspense, and it says the Bureau owns her. Under FBI protection, Sarah isn't even Sarah Walsh anymore. Her name is what they tell her. Her home is where they send her, and she's never there for long. A stranger owns her. Though faceless, he haunts Sarah's dreams. He's the man who abducted her as a child and continues to stalk her. He's the one who's determined to end their connection and Sarah's life. But most of all, fear owns her, which makes falling in love with a man as high profile as Adam Black a bad idea, and a dangerous one, for both of them. Sarah's world is an unsafe place for love, and certainly an unsafe place for the children Adam longs for. No one knows that better than Sarah, and she can't take the risk. But if she doesn't, her life will never be her own. Where will she find the courage to name her terror and face her fear? So basically, Sarah has been through so much and is constantly looking over her shoulder. This really caused so much stress for her. I can't even imagine the level of fear and anxiety if someone finds her, what's going to happen. Like, wow. But Adam doesn't know any of this, and he meets her by chance and just wants to get to know her. But he doesn't know where she works exactly, what her last name is. He has no way to contact her. He knows kind of what area of this city that she works in, like kind of one of 3 buildings sort of thing. So he goes on a search to find her, not knowing the scare that he's putting into her as he searches for her. There were parts of the story that did feel kind of unrealistic, but it's a fiction story, and the characters kept me engaged. It was the characters' relationships and kind of their tenacity, their strength to carry on, that just kept me wanting to know what was going to happen. And could Adam find Sarah? And would Sarah be safe? Would Sarah accept Adam as wanting to get to know her? He doesn't mean any harm for her. So I really enjoyed this, and there was a very, very strong faith element throughout the story. It was very evident. Each of the characters prayed and sought and looked for guidance from God and talked about it with each other. And Sarah's brother is there for her like, he's an FBI agent, so it's part of his job, but it's also he's her brother. So he is looking out for her best interest for her. And just this sibling relationship between the two, I loved it. And then, like, Adam coming in and trying to follow his heart, but also trying to keep Sarah safe. I really enjoyed this story, but because some of the events that happened seemed a little like really, so for that I only gave it 4 stars. However, I mean, as I mentioned, this book was written over 20 years ago, so before cell phones really were a thing. So it just, I think nowadays, like, it dated itself, right? So that's yeah. I really want to read the rest of the series this year, so hopefully I can get, there's 6 other books in the series, and they will be focusing, I think Sarah's brother is the main character in the like book 1 of the series. So we'll see. So then, going on to the next book I read. So the next book I read was for my first wheel spin. The prompt was a historical fiction that was a reread for me. So I chose to go with Head in the Clouds. This is by Karen Witemeyer. As it said, it was a reread. I had talked about this book in my book on the cover video, so it was kind of somewhat fresh in my mind, like, I really enjoyed that book at the time. I think it was probably 2-3 years ago when I read it for the first time, maybe, yeah, probably 3 years ago when I read it for the first time, but I didn't really remember a lot of it. So when I reread the summary for that video, when I talked about it, it was like, that sounds really interesting. So that is why I chose that book for that prompt. So I really enjoyed the characters of Adelaide and Gideon. So Adelaide has arrived in town after an impromptu decision that she made that didn't turn out the way that she was hoping it would turn out. She ends up getting a job as a governess for Gideon's daughter, Isabella. She is not really Gideon's daughter, he is the guardian for her. So they later find out, a little bit into the book, that Isabella's uncle is after her to try to get her inheritance. And they find out some dark secrets, bad information about Isabella's uncle, and they want to protect Isabella. So as Gideon and Adelaide are trying to work together to protect Isabella and keep her safe, a connection forms, and they start having feelings for one another. But because of kind of past trust issues or just circumstances that have happened, especially for Adelaide, she doesn't want to get involved with a man. And so things, carry on, and then the uncle arrives on scene and events take a turn. And so there was a secondary character who is actually the one that got got Adelaide the job, and he was like, I think just a lawyer maybe, or financial advisor for Gideon or something, I can't remember exactly now, but kind of an advisor of some sort for Gideon. And the comments that he made to Gideon about Adelaide just endeared me to him. I really enjoyed his character. Just the wisdom and friendship that he provided Gideon just made me fall in love with him. He was a character I wanted to spend more time with. I enjoyed both Gideon and Adelaide. I mean, Gideon is a British man who is in Texas, kind of trying to make his own way and not live off his family's money, and wants to build up this ranch that he has started from the ground up. And Adelaide is just, she always wears yellow, is a ray of sunshine, tries to be positive about everything, and they were fun characters to follow. The one issue that I had with the book was Isabella is described as a 5-year-old girl. However, some of the things that she does, some of the stuff she ends up saying, it was like, there's no way she's only 5. She came across as a much older child. So that kind of took away a little bit of the story for me. And again, there were some events that happened that just, I don't know, how could he do that? Like, how did he have the resources to do that? So, again, it's a fictional book, and sometimes angst have to be added just to increase the story, right? Or make the story a little bit more interesting. So in the end, I enjoyed the story. I really got into it, really liked the characters, and did not want to put it down once I was kind of in the middle of the story. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. So then the next book I picked up was, for my second prompt, was newest on the TBR. So the newest book on my TBR was Someplace Familiar by Teresa Tysinger. This was another reread for me, but I had read it as an ARC in 2018. So I didn't own it. And then it was on sale on Amazon on for my Kindle in the month of June, so I picked it up. So that's why it was the newest on my TBR. So I read that one, and then I read the other 3 books in the series. So because I read 4 books in a series, I'm not going to talk about them here. I'm going to do a separate video, which will go up tomorrow, just talking about those 4 books of that series. So kind of watch for that tomorrow. So then my third spin came up with the lowest rated book on my Goodreads. So the book that was my lowest rated was Secrets of Sloane House by Shelley Gray. This has a 3.5 rating on my Goodreads. And so I had picked this one up, I think it was in my March haul. I picked it up at the end of February, I think it was. I found it at the thrift store in town. So, I mean, it's an advanced reader copy, but I didn't get it as an advanced reader copy. This book originally came out in July of 2014. I had never read anything by this author before, and I just finished this morning, late last night, this morning. So I wasn't really sure going into it for a couple of reasons. One, it was my lowest rated book on Goodreads. So is that a sign that I'm not going to like it, or do I have a different opinion? And 2, it's a historical fiction set around the Chicago's World Fair with women going missing. Now, I had just read a book in June with this exact same premise. I had read The White City by Grace Hitchcock, and I didn't really enjoy it that much. But it was so fresh in my mind that when I started reading this book, like the first couple chapters, I was like, I felt like I was missing something. Because it was like, well, where are the characters of Winnie and Jude? Like, Winnie witnessed the kidnapping. And I'm like, wait a second, no, completely different book, completely different story. This one has no relation to that book. They just happen to be set in the same time period, in the same city, during the same World Fair. But it was in my head, so that it was totally on me. Once I got to know the characters that featured in this one, the main character is Rosalind, who has arrived in town from Wisconsin. She's probably about 19, 20 years old. and she has got a job at Sloane House, which is kind of one of the richest families in Chicago. And she is working there as a maid. She's undercover because her sister, her older sister, was working there and then went missing. So after her dad came to town and tried to figure out what's going to happen, he didn't get any answers. So then Rosalind gets the job under a fake name and to try to figure out what happened to her sister Miranda. So we never get to know Miranda. Like, the story is never told from her point of view at all. It's just you get to know her through Rosalind and her memories of her and what conversations with the other servants in the house who knew her and worked with her. And so Miranda has gone missing. They have no answers of where she went. Nobody really knows, and Rosalind is determined to figure it out. She meets Reed Armstrong, who is a friend of the oldest son of the Sloan family. And so total, like, different classes, right? Because they're part of the upper class and Rosalind is a maid in the house. So, but Reed kind of notices her and is starting to suspect things about Douglas, the Sloane's son, and kind of wants to kind of cut himself off, kind of remove himself from the relationship. And so he starts befriending Rosalind and they start searching for what's going on. So Rosalind arrives in town as, she's a farm girl, not used to the big city, and this World Fair is going on, so there's a ton of people around, and she's very meek and mild and scared basically of everything. The first time she was told she had to go ride a grip car, she was like, what? How? Like, she didn't know how to do it, or where she was supposed to go or anything. And then probably halfway through the story, she starts to build and find her confidence and becomes much more sure of herself. While I enjoyed the story and I became invested in what really happened, what was going on, there was kind of a couple things that I thought might have happened, but I wasn't 100% sure. I could not put the book down at that point. I had to know what was going to happen. The way that some of the servants treated her was not very nice. She became very isolated, very lonely, and all because, they were looking out for themselves and their jobs. And by the end, Rosalind no longer has a job, but she is closer to answers. It becomes very obvious that she's closer to answers. So I really enjoyed the way the story wrapped. I was shocked by exactly what happened. Well, I knew that certain things were happening. I didn't suspect the person that actually did it in the end. So one thing to note, though, is there is mention of references to the mistreatment of women, and not just like verbal mistreatment, taking advantage of a woman. There is a rape mentioned. It is not described other than like hands around her neck, dress torn, end of scene. So, but it just, the treatment of the upper class and the lower, like kind of the divide between the two just breaks my heart. How can anybody treat anybody that way? But then there's the Armstrong family, who shows that this doesn't happen in all circles. And the servants at the Armstrong house are treated much better and very differently than they're treated at the Sloan house. So they're not all the same. So I enjoyed the story overall. It did start out slow, but once I got halfway in, I needed to know what's going to happen. And as I said, I suspected exactly like kind of everything, but the very last reveal I had not expected. So I enjoyed the story, but it's not a reread for me. Like, it's not a book that I'm going to keep on my shelves and to reread. So I gave it a 3 out of 5. And those are all the books that I read in the month of July. So probably my favorite book for the month of July. I had basically, this was my lowest rated book. The lowest rated on Goodreads, lowest rated that I rated for the month of July. All the other books were either 4 or 5 stars. So choosing a favorite book is going to be a little hard. But I would say my favorite book will for the month of July will probably be Say It's for Good by Teresa Tysinger, which I mentioned I will talk about in the complete Laurel series review, which will be posted tomorrow. So thank you for joining me today. I'd love to chat in the comments below. Tell me what was your favorite read for the month of July. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.